Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification button. As always, let's go! Welcome to another episode of the Nick Ferg Show. And the guest I have here today, when you think about the world of sports in your everyday life, you would never know that this quaint gentleman has impacted Sundays and our air travel. So Larry Wansley is my guest, and his new book, he's going to lay it all out for you in tough streets, rough skies, and Sunday sidelines. Mr. Wansley, thank you for giving me some time. Good morning.
Thank you kindly. It is truly a pleasure to be on your show, and thank you for inviting me.
Yes, let's get right into it because as I can see in your backdrop, there's a lot of model airplanes. So I want you to explain to our listening audience how your experience in security changed the way that we travel starting back or going back to 9/11.
Yes, going back to actually, it was before 9/11 because there are um, listeners and people that will be viewing this that can recall going to the airport and going directly to the gate to the plane to see off whomever they were taking or to meet whomever they were going to be meeting at the airplane. You could go directly to the gate, nothing in between. And then that morphed to a situation where there was checkpoint screening at the airport, and that was the responsibility of the airlines. We all contracted out to the same small group of companies to do that work. Well, the performance was abysmal. It was terrible. The FAA continually tried to get threat items through, which they did quite successfully. And for every time there was a failure there, we, the airlines, were fined. And for each one of those, it was an $11,000 fine, and they all came to me. Okay. I had a couple of analysts in my department that did nothing but process those. As a result, when they finished their preliminary work, then I had a decision to make, and that was, do I simply write a check? Do we try to fight it? That costs a whole lot more money if we do. Or do I try to just mitigate the price down as much as I possibly can? That's the way life was for every airline at that point. I had a conversation with my boss, the legendary Bob Crandall at American Airlines, and we were talking about myriad of things in security, one of which was the screening. And he said, there's got to be a better way. And I said, there is. He charged me with finding a better way, coming up with a plan for a better way. And I spent all of 1996 working on that. And he said, you got to do your regular job too. So we'll put a little extra money in there. If you want to hire somebody to help you, that's fine. So for all of 1996, I worked on that. At the end of the year, presented the program to him, and I called it the Federal Security Screening Agency. And it was a combination, it was a government-run program, but it had all the stakeholders in the aviation world included. It was presented, he liked it, he presented it the next month, in January of 1997, to everybody and anybody that was involved in aviation. It was very well received, except there was a little reluctance, not a little reluctance, but a lot of reluctance on the part of one airline who said, "Oh, we're just simply going to fight it." Well, the FAA's position was, unless every airline is on board with this, we're just going to study it and hold on it and so forth. So from January 97, I continued to try and keep it on the front burner, twist arms, et cetera, et cetera. And then along came 9/11.
Mm.
That time was the worst time of my life and the worst for everybody in our nation. 2 days later, in the American Airlines Command Center, hair's on fire, we're going nuts. Life was absolutely chaotic. And that's when I received a call from the Secretary of Transportation's office and they said, send send the program back. 2 months later, it became, excuse me, it became the law of the land in the form of the TSA. So
Mm.
what you have now, when you travel, anybody that travels, they're touched by those events of that day and how things progressed during those years. The sad thing about it is on that day, we had nearly 3,000 people who lost their lives. It possibly would not have happened to that extent, may not have happened at all, but it was one of those things that impacted our lives and forevermore. Anybody in this country or anybody in the world that travels are impacted by that.
So, I mean, everything that you said, I mean, I was in New York during 9/11. I played for the Jets at the time, and I remember all the protocols that were in place. And some travelers were a little upset because it was a little of an inconvenience. But I'm of the frame of mind, taking security as a high priority is something that I even do with my own home. And I always recommend people, make that a top priority for themselves. But your experience in law enforcement started way before you got your involvement in aviation because, in reading on you, you were a police officer in Compton, but you graduated to being an FBI agent and going undercover. Now, I've watched a lot of undercover cop movies, but I'm sure your life was entirely different from those that I've seen. But talk to us a little about how your undercover, life impacted you in your professional life, but also your family as well.
Well, it took a tremendous toll on my family. I have the greatest family in the world. Any man can say that about his, and rightfully so. But the hardships that I put my family through during those years were incredible. Uh, my wife was a tremendous trooper because she raised my kids during those formative years. I was someone else.
Mm.
I was out living a life as someone else. My family did not see me very much at all, maybe once or twice a month for a couple of days. And when I did show up, I totally frightened my children because I was a different person. And my wife and I had made a deal that when I did come home, I would leave the other guy outside. Well, it's a life that really totally absorbs you. And it became more and more difficult to leave the other guy outside. And it impacted our family like you would not believe. The hardships were unbelievable. The challenges were unbelievable because back then, the undercover technique or process was not something that the FBI did.
Mm.
After J. Edgar Hoover passed away, it was like now we're not free, but now we can expand and get into other techniques and other protocols and everything else. So I was one of those people. I was actually one of 14 people that really went undercover. I didn't know about the others.
Mm.
Patty Hearst, the great Patty Hearst case, SLA, Black Panthers, the whole Black Revolutionary movement was one where it really kicked it off. And by that, I mean, I was in San Antonio and I had come from Compton. Compton, for the life of a cop, there was none better than Compton because it was a constant thrill. I mean, it really was. Life on edge. You were in shootouts all the time, car chases, fights, you name it. And for a young guy, out of the Marine Corps, hey, that's pretty interesting stuff, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, but after going to the FBI and then Patty Hearst came along and the Black Revolutionary Movement came along, I was sent from San Antonio to LA, and my mission, along with five other Black agents from around the country, and there weren't many of us at that time, but our mission was to basically infiltrate the revolutionary movement. And it was primarily to find Patty Hearst, but along the way, we were going to be infiltrating these revolutionary groups, the Black Panthers, the SLA, us, all of them. They all have their own little style or purpose or what have you. But that whole world was one that I became a part of. That put me on the undercover path. So after Patty Hearst was ultimately captured, and I was very disappointed in the sense that it wasn't me that got her.
Right.
Okay. But that's just a human thing because we put so much time and effort into that. But consequently, that put me on to an undercover path, if you will. And while in LA, I started doing other undercover work, corruption type stuff. Ultimately, was transferred back to LA to really get into it full time. Became a part of a process or a program which basically set me up as a uh, high flying, rich con man. I lived the Beverly Hills, Hollywood jet set. I dealt with a lot of celebrity type people, some that weren't celebrities, but all were crooks nonetheless.
Mm.
And consequently, but part of my technique, part of my MO was simply befriending them, becoming friends with them. They were very, very comfortable with me. And some I would just absolutely jump in, do deals with them and knock them off. But some I have to say that I like them.
Mm.
Friends that happen to be crooks.
Yeah.
And some of them really try to do business with me. Hey, look, I've got this for look, just no, I would put them off simply because I did not want to be that person that took them down. Now, if somebody else did it, that's fine,
Right.
but not me because I happen to like them. Some I played handball with, and it was like that. So I had that psychological conflict, but all of that was rolling along very, very well. And then I was called back to Quantico, to the FBI Academy, for an undercover seminar or in service, it was called. That's when I met the other guys from around the country who were all doing their own thing. We didn't know about one another, to be very, very clear about it. And that's when we learned about each other. That's when we learned about different techniques and the stories, and we all learned from each other. But the whole point of that was to establish a criteria and standards for undercover work because we were there at the academy and we were for lack of a better description, we were the lab rats for the psychiatrist and the psychologist for the shrinks. So we'd be in class and then you'd be pulled out and you'd go spend some time on the couch, so to speak, and talking with the shrinks because they were really focused on what are those criteria, what are those standards that are common throughout these guys. What makes a person a good undercover agent? What makes one not? Because back then, working undercover was the sexy, hot thing. We had a small group of us that were, I mean, we were being courted by field divisions all around the country. You know, hey, we've got this operation. We want you to do this. So it was a good lifestyle, but it was dangerous as hell. It really was. But we were well, I'll speak for myself. I was so caught up in the thrill of the chase and everything else that you were focused on your mission,
Mm.
out conning the con. That's what it was all about. And in so doing, you really forsook, or I forsook, my family in a sense that a lot of what was going on with them, I just simply was not involved in, aware of, or anything like that. And that's why I say my wife was such a trooper. And all of that really came down at a point when I happened to overhear my son ask my wife why I did not love them anymore.
Mm.
That broke my heart. So it's a tough life. It's not what you see on TV. You don't get instantaneous information or results or anything like that. it's a lot of hard work. And for every guy that's out front as the primary operative and dealing with the crooks and so forth, there is an army of people behind that person supporting him or her, also providing backup information, investigations, and so forth. So it is indeed a team. It is truly a team. You might have that one person out front, but there are a whole lot of folks behind. But I have to say, it was one of the most thrilling, exhilarating jobs or roles that I've had over the years. I came close to losing my life several times, the worst of which was when I actually transferred from LA after a 2 year stint in deep undercover. And I came to Dallas to get away from it, to go back to doing normal FBI work. I was here one day and I was right back in it. And I became partners with a corrupt sheriff who ran the whole eastern sector of the state of Texas. He and a whole bunch of his cronies were all corrupt officials and they ruled it. Well, as a front man for a mob group, my job, I would go around the country and I would set up illegal gambling operations. The sheriff and I became partners. It got to the point where things are rocking along. I was very credible in the community and everything else. But the sheriff one night had his deputies pick me up and they said, he needs to talk with you. I said, okay. I had met with him several times individually, no surveillance, no wires or anything like that.
Mhm.
So we had that kind of relationship, and I was quite frankly comfortable. I was okay with it. But we went out to an oil field in Kilgore, Texas, and it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, moonlit night, and we take a walk across the oil field, and the pumpers are pumping, and it's oil field machinery, right? And uh, that night, the atmosphere was very thick, dewy. And you could smell the loamy odor of the soil and what have you. And as we walked along, we walked over to a big hole. And he's talking with me, and he said, you know, the word around town is that you've got a lot of side action going on, and I'm not getting my piece of it. Now, that's bad for my reputation.
Hmm.
And when he said that, he pulled out his pistol and he cocked it and he put it against my head. There were a couple of thoughts that came to mind at that instant, none of which I'll repeat for this broadcast, but you can imagine
Yeah.
because I thought, I've got a real problem here. Now, in an instant, my mind went through a progression, if you will, like say a quarterback does in a particular play. But I thought if I tell him my mob people will come take him out if he whacks me, that'll only appeal to his sense of bravado because he ran that whole section of the state. If I tell him I'm really an FBI agent, he'll just bury me deeper.
Mhm.
And what I did with him is I went off on him. I went absolutely crazy. I got in his face. I dared him to shoot me, kill me, blah, 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 blah. If you're that stupid, you're going to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. You are a dumb, blah, 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 blah. Okay. It was very fiery language. I'll put it that way. And he just kind of looked at me, hesitated for a second, and smiled. And he said, I guess we don't have to have this conversation anymore. I
Hmm.
said, no, we don't. I was cool. I kept thinking, okay, Wansley, just be cool. You know, this is going your way. We walked back to the car. They took me back to my car. I went home. I walked into my apartment. I went to the bar. I got a bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey like this, a water glass, no mix, no ice, no nothing. And I was doing this supported. And I drank that whole glass. It put me out. But all of that culminated with everybody being taken down. We arrested 21 people, all corrupt officials and everything else. It was the biggest thing in East Texas at that time that had ever happened because the whole world out there knew the guy was a crook. They knew all the officials were crooks. They were corrupt. They were powerless. They had no control of anything. There were countless murders that took place that are basically attributed to him and to his cronies. It was basically a cesspool. And the fact that the FBI took this guy down and the fact that it was a black agent that did it, that was the cherry on top because when it went to trial, that first group of defendants in the trial in Tyler, federal trial, people were sleeping out on the sidewalk at night in sleeping bags or lawn chairs or whatever so that they would get a spot in the courtroom the next morning. It was huge. We got him. He was convicted. That night, the conviction came in, and actually, one of the defendants committed suicide in his cell. But anyway, that was the closest time that I really thought I'm going to die here. But there were other times, but none quite as graphic as that. I apologize for that long-winded description, but I live with that all the time.
No, that's great because you're taking people behind the curtain and showing exactly what that life is like and how the depiction in real life is entirely different than the way that television and the movies depict it. But I mean, in listening to you, you talked about the years of being undercover and how it impacted your family. And the biggest thing is, okay, well, with that being the case, how did you pull yourself out of that world? Because once again, I just go back to things I've read and just kind of watched. When someone's undercover for so long, they embody the character that they have created. So how did you pull yourself out of that to be who you are now?
Well, first of all, we lost a couple of guys who actually went over to the other side. They were so entrenched in that life and everything else. And it's a difficult thing. But one of the things that was extremely important is the fact that you had to have that contact agent, that umbilical cord that kept you tied to reality. And sometimes it was hard and difficult conversations because they had to keep you straight. They had, and when I say keep you straight, it was such a mental game, if you will, a world that you lived in that you had to keep it all together. And by that, one of the processes I went through, and I lived this for so many years, before every meeting, discussion, encounter I would have with a crook, I would what if it to death. I would think about all the contingencies, what might happen, and everything else. So I'd go through all of that. That took a lot of time, so I didn't sleep much. I would always be thinking about what was happening, what was going to happen, how would I react, and so forth. When it came time for that encounter, it was simply showtime. It was instinct. You went with the flow, you did what you did, and everything else. Afterward, then I'd critique myself to death. He said this, I said that. I wonder what he was thinking, and so forth. Consequently, I didn't sleep much. On average, when I did sleep, it would be about 3 hours for years because that was the mindset that I was in. But it was one of those things that was the life of an undercover person. The stress that you go through, the psychological stress, never mind the physical piece of it. And because all of that was who you were. And then in response to all that, after you'd had those kind of encounters, then you would meet with your team, the FBI team, the investigators, those people that were behind the scenes that would be running down information, the bits and pieces of information that would come up during your conversation or your deal and everything else. So consequently, it's a very complex thing. TV and movies make it look sexy. It is a terrible and tough life. It really is. When you're successful, it's the greatest feeling in the world. When you're not, maybe you don't have any feeling because you disappear. Your life is at stake all the time in that world. The least slip up can be a deadly one. So that's the kind of life that people live. And as the saying goes, it ain't about what you see on TV or anything
Right.
like that. Yeah.
So, how did you make that transition to being the director of corporate security for the Dallas Cowboys? And the reason I asked that question because now it's 32 teams, and every team has a guy who's in charge of team security, and they go through all these protocols when it comes to hotels and travel and all of those things. How do you make that transition from this life of, tough streets and rough skies and get to Sunday sidelines? How did that happen?
Well, that happened. It's amazing because our lives are guided from above. I'm a man of faith, trust in God. I mean, I am alive today because God has guided me and He's put me where He wanted me. I had gotten to a point where the undercover life was so draining, so tough, and everything else. I needed a time to kind of reset and get my head together, get myself together. So during that period, I became a counselor at the FBI National Academy. It was a 3-month assignment. It was basically to just reset, which I did. It helped me a great deal. It firmly grounded me. It got me back into the mindset of helping people and so forth. And I basically had people that I had 50 people that I was responsible for. And these were all high ranking officers from police, government, you name it. But my job was to help them through the whole academic process and everything else. So I was their counselor. So that got me back into the counseling mindset. When I finished that, I was contacted, and well, when I finished that, I was actually going to be going to Monterey, California for Arabic language school. I was going to get back into the undercover world. But it's funny how things happen because I was then contacted by the NFL security, and the message was, we are looking for candidates around the country um, for on behalf of the Dallas Cowboys because they want to create a position. And your name keeps coming up. You're one of those people that we want to have some discussion with. And I said, okay, great. That's fine. What's the job? Well, we don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I mean, but you're doing this search, and they said, well, we just don't have much detail, but they definitely want someone with your kind of background. Okay. Now they said we're talking to other people, and okay, fine, that's cool. Had a great meeting with the league representative, and it was a fellow by the name of Charlie Jackson at the time.
Mm,
NFL security consisted of 2 people in New York, period.
mm,
Around the country, they had contractors. These were law enforcement people, ex-law enforcement people that had their own investigative agencies, but they were contracted to the league. There was no team security, period. The
mm.
teams didn't have anything at all. Well, I met with Tech Schramm, and that was truly an education for me because I had gotten a call from the league rep who said Tech Schramm wants to meet with you at his house on Sunday. And I said, okay, that's great. I show up in a black 3-piece suit and
Yeah.
I'm clean, as the saying goes. Tex came to the door and a la Rodney Dangerfield in a baggy Hawaiian shirt and Bermuda shorts, and he had a full scotch in his hand. He said, hey, come on in. Yeah, have a drink.
Yeah.
No, sir, not right now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we sat down and we had an absolutely incredibly enjoyable conversation for about an hour or so, during which he keeps offering me drinks. After that, Coach Tom Landry showed up. That was a shock because Tom Landry walked in the door looking like a mortal man,
Mm,
just an average guy. I had Every time I'd ever seen him, he was clean, his fedora and everything else.
Yeah.
He looked like he'd been cleaning his garage. All right. Sat down, and then we start talking with him. And he's cracking jokes. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Here I am, Wansley. I'm with two legends,
Yeah.
Tex Schramm and Tom Landry. Schramm is trying to get me drunk. Landry's telling these kind of sort of corny jokes, but I'm having a good time. We didn't talk about anything that I felt was substantive, like background, qualifications, whatever. Didn't talk about what the job was.
Mm.
We just had a conversation, three guys just talking, getting to know one another. Tex then said, well, look, we have a function that we both have to go speak at. Tom's got to go home. We've got to prepare and everything. But if you'll be at home around 7 o'clock tonight, I'd like to call you. I'll have a few minutes and I'd like to give you a call. Sure. I walked out of there. I really did. And I was thinking, what happened?
Yeah.
Great time, but we didn't talk about anything that I expected. I went home, 7 o'clock, text call. Larry, this is Tex. Oh, yes, sir, Mr. Schramm. No, none of that, Mr. Schramm, blank.
Yeah.
Tex. Yes, sir. Hey, I sure would like to have you on my team. How about it? Wow, that's great. Yeah. Well, look, I have to go give this blankety blank speech. He said, you go to the office tomorrow morning, you meet a guy named Joe Bailey, we'll get you on our roster, and you're gonna like what we do for you. Financially, you're gonna be great. We've got all kind of other stuff for you. So you just go do that, and I don't care if it's 2 months or 2 weeks or 2 months or 6 months that you have to give the government, whatever it takes, that's fine, but you'll be on our payroll tomorrow.
Mm.
Well, I have to go give this speech, click. And I'm standing there, phone in hand, and my wife is looking up at me and she said, what just happened? I said, I think I just accepted a job with the Dallas Cowboys. She said, doing what? I said, I don't know. And it terrified her. It absolutely terrified her because our life was comfortable, even with the undercover stuff and everything else. FBI was a great career. Everything was, we were a family and so forth in the FBI. So life was good. Now here is the great unknown.
Mm.
And it was a tough night at my house. There were a lot of tears, a lot of anxiety. And she and my kids were very, very much afraid until I went to the office the next day and found out my salary and all the benefits and everything. And again, all that changed in a
I'll
hurry.
change automatically.
Right. But the point to this is when they signed me up, I asked, what is my job description? I mean, all this is great.
Hmm.
What am I supposed to do? The answer was, you have to talk to Tex about that. And I said, okay, well, he said he's going to be out of town for the next week. So when he gets back, you sit down with him and he'll explain everything to you. I said, okay. Switch forward the following week, I met with Tex and we're sitting in his office tower near SMU. And I said, what's my job description? And he said, you government guys would be technical. I said, well, you're paying me some great money, and I just want to know what do you want me to do? What's my job? And he turned his back to me and he looked out over the city, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, did I piss the guy off or what? And he slowly turns around and he faces me and he leans over and he said, here is your job description. The situation's one when the players are on the field, they're Tom Landry's responsibility.
Mm.
As soon as they come off, they're yours. Your job is to make sure that when they go back on the field, there is nothing screwing with their mind or their body that prevents them from being the best football player that they can possibly be. That's your job description. Oh, okay. What kind of a budget do I have for that? He said, don't worry about budgets. He said, just do it. Make it happen. He
Mm,
said, kid, I'm giving you a blank canvas. Paint me a masterpiece. Don't blank it up. Okay. So what kind of a charge is that? I walked out, but that was the big beginning because nothing existed. No team security, no player programs, no nothing. Amidst all of that, there was a lot of media attention. Cowboys hire FBI super spy and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, um, I was really helped a great deal by two former players. One was a guy named Thomas Hollywood Henderson,
yeah.
and, and another was a linebacker recently passed, bless his soul, D.D. Lewis. And they independently reached out to me and said, look, I know what your job is supposed to be. I
Mm,
want to help you. I want to help you help my brother players.
yes.
Everything that I've gone through in my life, I've learned some lessons from. I've had bad times. I've done dumb things and everything else. So I want to help you help my brother players. Those guys, I love them dearly because they were committed to helping their brothers. What I learned at the time in the early 80s, cocaine was a huge problem with
Mm,
players in the NFL and NBA, but NBA also. But what I did is I went to Cleveland. I met Calvin Hill,
yeah.
Paul Warfield, Coach Sam Retigliano, and Dr. Greg Collins at the Cleveland Clinic. They were just beginning to embark on a program to address drug abuse
Mm,
with players that they knew about and what have you. And it was called the Inner Circle. And so I got kind of an overview or introduction as to what they had in mind.
mhm.
From there, I went to Hazelden, Minnesota, into a full inpatient drug treatment program. I lived with addicts for the full 28 days, 24/7. Now, the facility administration had to approve me being there, as did every member of the group that I was with, the addicts, the people that I lived with. They all knew who I was, why I was there. They knew I was there to learn how does a person get to this stage in their life when the drugs, when they just totally control their lives. And I lived with them. I learned so incredibly much at that time with them that when I left there, I took everything that I learned back and I came back to the Dallas Cowboys and I started building programs. Obviously, the substance abuse piece of it, player programs, continuing education, financial planning, all of those that are now part of the player development world were created right there in Dallas, Texas with the Cowboys. We started that, and then the rest of the league began to pick up on those. The team security piece of it, same thing. They started hiring other people. But we, at the Cowboys, we established that cornerstone
Mm,
to really address the needs of the players and obviously the organizations and so forth and so on. But that's how it happened. And it was an exciting time because I was given the authority and the funds and everything else to really make these things happen. I'm a creative person. I like art. I like to create. Okay. And in a way, that's what it was all about because I saw a need and I was given the resources and the support to address those needs. That's how it all started.
mm. So with all of that and the development of the program, I guess it's safe to call you the godfather of security in the NFL, but also the godfather of player development in the NFL. Can we actually say that? Can we call you the godfather since you essentially came up with these programs?
I did, and I'm flattered by the notion and the term. I do want to say that it could not have happened had I not been given the support and the confidence and had the confidence of the people that gave it to me. It was trial by, doing and whatever. I came from a world where I saw something that needed to be fixed and went about trying to fix it. It actually spending time with the addicts in Hazelden, I learned so much from that. For my first 6 years in the league with the team, every off season, I would go to a different facility around the country. I did work with Thomas Henderson, who was very, very much engaged in rehab and everything else. So it was a world that was new to me because coming from law enforcement, life was simple. Drugs, narcotics, jail.
Right.
It's all of that stuff in between, those factors in between that were important. And here I was, Wansley, guy from a little one horse town in Missouri. All of a sudden, I'm thrust into this world with all these issues and problems and what have you, and having the support of people that said, hey, go fix it. That's what I did. So I'm very, very proud of that work because it set the standard so many ways around the league for other teams and everything else. And I'm proud to say that my son Brian is the director of player development at the Cowboys.
Wow.
So
That's that's
yeah,
that's totally awesome. I mean, that's kind of like a 360 moment to know that you being his father, there was a moment where you were undercover and there was a level of uncertainty. You get the job with the Cowboys and you were part of starting all this player development, action that's currently in the league. And now your son is now following essentially in your footsteps with the Cowboys, a team that gave you your first start. That's amazing.
it is. No, I'm truly blessed. I'm very, very blessed. And I just simply can't say anything more than that. It's all from above. And so consequently, I like to think that I've made a difference. I've talked to other members of the media and people and so forth. And I recently did an interview with Gary Myers. And Gary is the first media person that I did an interview with when I was at the Cowboys back during those mystery years and everything
Yeah.
else. And but out of that, it was like, what do you think people will remember you by? What statement or what do you want people to remember about you? That was quite a question, but two words. He cared. That's all.
Yeah.
I simply care, and that's what I'm about. So if there is anything, any way, anyhow, even going into the whole airline business and all the tragedy and horrific activities involved in there, I just simply care. I care about people. And I came from a world where it was during the height of segregation and everything else, oppression, you name it. And I was told as a young high school freshman that number one, I can't, I can never achieve my dreams because college is not for Negroes.
Mm.
My guidance counselor told me, you marry that little gal, I'll get you a job at the rock quarry, at the loading dock at the trucking company. Marry that little gal of yours and have some babies, have a nice life. But no, college and Negroes, no, that's not for Negroes.
Mm.
That was the wrong thing to say to me. That motivated me, and that to this day drives me because we all have something incredible to contribute. We do. Those we all have those life-defining moments, and I won't call them milestones or anything like that because milestones kind of signify a goal and reaching an accomplishment or whatever. It's more than that. It's life-defining moments. Something happens in your life that makes you pivot. makes you take a little different direction or whatever, a little different perspective, but you're always moving forward.
Yes.
That's the way that I am.
Well, you know what? There's something you mentioned. You mentioned the name. Obviously, me growing up, heard a lot about the Dallas Cowboys, obviously being America's team. And you mentioned Hollywood Henderson with all your background in law enforcement and some of the issues that he had as a player. How did that relationship, work with both you and, both of you guys and helping him work through some of his issues both on and off the field?
Well, by the time that I met him, he had been through all of that. His life had changed. He was dedicated to reform. He was dedicated to helping people. He was at that stage where he had been through all of that, all the hardships and everything else. His message simply was every conceivable way a player could screw up, I did it.
Mhm.
I've been fortunate enough to overcome that now. I had people in my life that helped me through. I'm involved now in these rehab programs and everything else. That's why, having been through it, I want to help you help my brothers. So, have the greatest admiration for him. Really together guy, and he helped me a great deal.
Mm. Now, with your career expanding from Compton to the FBI to the Dallas Cowboys, there's another segment of your life and being, a long-time law enforcement personnel. You had a chance to kind of, I guess, tour with Whitney Houston. How did that come about, and what was it like touring with her and trying to make sure that she was protected from a security standpoint?
Well, and with your background and so forth, you'll certainly understand this. From out of the blue, I was contacted by her father, who said, up to this point, she's been touring, the US, North America. Her security basically consists of her friends.
Hmm.
Now we're going international, and I need a pro. And I keep asking around, and your name keeps coming up. Long story short, I thanked him, I'm flattered, but no thank you. Well, a series of phone calls. Each time the numbers go up, and he said, at least come talk to us, come meet us. He said, you're not playing football until later in the year. And this was at the first part of the year. And I went to my boss, Tech Schramm, and I said, this is what's happening. And Tech's always the visionary, always
Mhm.
said, wait a minute, let's just think about this for a second. The NFL is going to start an international league. They're really focused and interested in playing in foreign countries.
Mm.
So I will let you go do this under certain conditions. First, that the operation here won't suffer. You can run it from afar. And I said, well, okay, that's fine. I had a great staff. Secondly, no matter where you are, I can reach out and I can get you. Yes, sir. Third thing is you promote football however you can when you're bouncing around the world with her. Promote football. NFL International.
Mm.
Yes, sir. Long story short, I did. And at every hotel that we checked into, I would have 3 or 4 boxes of Cowboys swag. And in that world, artists follow one another. They're always in the art audience and so forth and backstage.
Yeah.
So I would get them all duded up in Cowboys swag, t-shirts,
Ah,
caps, you name it. And back then, this is before the internet and everything else. And this was a big, big deal. Whitney she even wore a cowboy t-shirt during a couple of numbers during shows. Okay,
interesting.
you can't buy that kind of advertising. But the point of it was that world was one where number one, that they thought that I would be so enthralled with it
Yeah.
that I would just get caught up in it. And it was a great life. They treated me very well. The money was phenomenal and all of that. But I came from a world, I was around entertainers a lot. I mean, there were entertainers in my family before your time, but there was a group called the Fifth Dimension.
Yeah,
And the Fifth Dimension was started and run by my cousin, a guy named Ron Townsend. And Ron, myself, my cousins, and the boys, we used to hang out on the street corner singing.
yeah.
Ron had the least talent of any of them. He, he stuck with it. There were others. There was a group called the Dells. But anyway,
Yeah,
in my family, we always had juke joints and rib joints. So every R&B, every blues artist that came through the St. Louis area played at our clubs. So I was around that all the time. I knew Ike Turner before there was a Tina.
yeah.
I knew when Tina first did her show. I saw her when she first got started. So I was not intimidated or enthralled with the whole entertainment aspect of it. I did know, and I was focused on the fact that the problems were not her. Problems emanated by people around her.
Mm,
That whole atmosphere, that whole world. So I had to remind myself my focus, my job is her, making sure that she's all right, making sure that she is protected. I can't be distracted by all this other stuff because it's going to happen. There were three roadies that we lost on tour that we were coming out of Amsterdam going into the UK.
mhm.
They just disappeared. Just put it that way.
Weird.
Well,
Yeah.
because they were caught with drugs.
Okay.
Okay. So that was the life. And fortunately, because of the experience that I'd had undercover and law enforcement and everything else, I was able to focus, 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 focus. I got into the habit of at the end of every night, and this is where a lot of my book comes from. At the end of every night, and that was sometime between 3 and 4 in the morning, I'm finally settled in. All the hatches are battened down, everything's secure. I've got guards in the right place and so forth. And I could settle in, take a hot shower. And this is the weird thing. My kids say, Dad, what? I would have a cup of tea and two Walker's shortbread cookies. For what I was based in the UK, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, but what I would do is I would capture the essence of what the day consisted of.
Yeah.
Bullet points. These were the important things. That got me into the habit of basically keeping a journal. I started that. That was in 1988. To this day, I do it. So over the years, through Whitney, World League, all of that, American Airlines, all the wild, crazy things that happen around the world, I had them basically, I had talking points and everything else. I captured all of that. By then, I had the intention of at some point, I'm going to put this all together into a book. So what we have now is the culmination of that process.
That's amazing. The life that you live and how you started out to kind of making that segue to sports and just, hearing the story of how you have impacted once again so many things that, in our lives, from TSA to being in NFL player development, security and making sure security is what it is today. There was something I was reading and you can tell me if it's true or not. There were a couple of Dallas Cowboys players who kind of end up missing before the game. And you and Tom Landry had a conversation, which now has led to why players are now in hotels before the game. I'll let you expand on that story.
Uh, this was a survival situation because on game day, the very, very beginning of our season, there were a couple of well, there was one player that was missing, and I had to go out and find him. Well, I found him uh, in a section of the city frequented that was primarily occupied by um, nightclubs, strip clubs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I found him in the bar owner's office at the back, uh, passed out on a couch. And this was a 6 foot, 6'7", 300-pound guy. And at that time, I was about 188, 90 pounds. Lugged him out of there.
Yeah.
And there's no weight like dead weight.
Mhm.
Okay. Got him back to the trainers, and I said, okay, here he is. They said, well, we got another one for you. Oh, good grief. So all my FBI skills, investigative and everything else, I found him and his um, fiance that he had met for the first time the night before, uh, rousted, rousted him out of bed, drag him, get him to the trainers, and then the rest of game day and all that takes place and so forth. But the following morning, um, I was meeting with Coach Landry, and it was basically, how's it going? How did it go? And so forth. I said, Coach, I really need to ask you a favor. And he said, well, okay, well, what's that? I said, if it's going to be like this, where I've got to go out and round guys up, do fugitive investigations on game day and round these guys up and everything else, I'm not going to make it. This is a matter of survival.
Yeah.
Can we stay in a hotel the night before home game so that I don't have to deal with this? Because I'm simply not going to make it. And Coach Landry sat there and he pondered for a minute and he said, I like that.
Mm.
Let's do it. So we started it. The rest of the league followed suit, as did college teams. And now that's the norm. But it all boiled down to the fact that looking at the man in the mirror, and I said, I'm going to die a lot sooner if I have to do this every game.
See, once again, this is why I love talking to you and love hearing so many things about your story because when we look around once again the world of sports, and a lot of things that you encountered when this first position with the Dallas Cowboys has not only shaped Cowboys football, but it also has shaped college football, the way that we look at football. And I thought about that before our interview. When I was a kid, there was this whole thing about, Dallas Cowboys being America's team. And as a kid, I was like, well, who coined that and who made that happen? But listening to you now, I understand being Whitney Houston, head of security and her bodyguard, and having her or the wherewithal to say, you know what? Thanks to Tex Schramm saying, hey, promote football internationally. We get the World League, we get NFL Europe, which I played in, and then also we get the dissemination of Cowboys gear. So you and Tex were on to something much larger than anyone knew at that time, and you guys have reshaped how we look at football.
Oh, without question. And unknowingly so.
Yeah.
It just sort of happened. We were doing things that just needed to be done. When you mentioned the World League and everything else, just before that kicked off, because the 1991 Super Bowl in Tampa, the
Hmm.
greatest rendition of the national anthem ever was
Yes.
done by Whitney.
Yes.
Well, I was there as a league official. We were just kicking off the World League. The Gulf War had just started, and I went in my official league capacity. I didn't know she was going to be singing the national anthem. I didn't know it until I showed up, and they said, "Well, Whitney Houston's going to." What? So I went by the dressing room to say hello and everything else. So there's a big reunion. I mean, it was a fun time. It was a very special moment. And she said, I'm going to go sing the national anthem. Hey, take me down to the field, just like old times. You know, Okay, great. So myself, her brother, her father, and we had a group of us, the
Yeah.
three or four of us, took her down to the field. The stadium was electric. It was absolutely electric because here we are. The world is at war. Our country's at war. The unity, the patriotism, the emotion was unbelievable. And she got up there, and I was standing probably about 10 to 15 feet in front of her, looking up at her. She's on the riser. Off to my right was the color guard, and behind her was the orchestra, and the stadium was packed, and people are waving their American flags. And it was just one of those things where you swelled up in pride and everything else. And then when she knocked it out of the park with her rendition of the national anthem, and the flyover, I mean, it choked me up. There were tears running down people's cheeks because it was such a dynamic and emotional moment. When we left and we're walking off the field, and I looked over at her and I said, "You killed it." She
Yeah.
said, she said, "I know." That that moment was one that I'll always cherish. I knew her when
Yeah.
before the trouble started. So I'll always cherish that because she was like a daughter to me. She really was. She was a good person. And I don't want the world to forget that part of her because all the negative stuff after that, I mean, that'll live on and what have you. But I was blessed to know her when. And yes,
Yeah, that was by far, when you look at the renditions of the national anthem, everyone is trying to attain what she was able to do. And I remember that as a kid watching that particular performance and how it just kind of reshaped how we looked at ourselves, not just as people, but as Americans. Before I let you go, I would be remiss if I did not ask you the question about Tex Schramm and Tom Landry, two historic guys who you met when you first was hired. And you didn't know what you were being hired for, but you were hired by the
that's right.
Dallas Cowboys. You know, tell us a little about those guys really quickly and how, like we may see videos, we may read, but the real people who, like Tom Landry was and Tex Schramm was, tell us a little about those individuals from your experience.
Both very caring people, different personalities, but all focused on the goal of being the very, very best, caring about their people. Now, there are a couple of other folks in my book because my book, and forgive me just for taking this side step, but my book is dedicated to the memory of the 9/11 victims
Mhm.
and all touched by that. My family, of course, but there are four people in my life that had everything to do with me becoming that person you're talking to right now, with all my experience. Tex Schramm, Tom Landry, Jerry Jones at the Cowboys, and Bob Crandall at American Airlines.
Mhm.
Those four men really helped shape who I am. But with respect to your question about Schramm and Landry, they were two totally different personalities. Tex was a brilliant guy who saw the big picture in terms of the business, the industry, the league, and the future, and so forth. Landry was a brilliant, caring, courageous man who cared about his players. He was really focused on caring about his players. They were his boys. That relationship was one. So in the commonality was two very, very brilliant men. Their focus, Tex was on the business of the world. There were a lot of people around the league that really had the understanding or felt like Tex was really the default commissioner. Pete
Yeah,
Rozelle,
the
you
vice
know,
commissioner.
yeah, but Tex, I mean, you see football on TV now because of Tex Schramm, going
Mm.
back to his CBS years when the Olympics and everything. It was his idea to put it on TV. And that's how his influence has affected our world today. Landry, in terms of a coach having a relationship with his players, um, none finer. Jerry Jones continued that whole world, that whole sense of presence and being with the players and relationships and so forth. Bob Crandall, in terms of the airline industry, he said to me the day that I met him, interviewed with him, he said, this business gets in your blood. And it does. Aviation and football are part of my soul. They really are. Uh, Anything having to do with that, I'm always absorbing it. I've got perspective. I always have an opinion about something.
Right.
Okay. But the point of it is they are part of who I am, what I am and about. And it's because of those men and their impact on my life.
Mhm.
I'll always cherish it. Always have the greatest respect and love for them because they made me who I am.
Mm. Well, I'll tell you guys, hey, Nick Ferg Show listeners, make sure you go up and pick up this book, Tough Streets, Rough Skies, and Sunday Sidelines. This is only a glimpse into, Larry Wansley's story and all the wild things he went through to get to this particular point. But this is a story or a book about the individuals from 9/11, but it takes you through the course of his life, how he got to this point. But it's a very unique story that you definitely need to pick up and read. Make sure you go out and grab this book, Tough Streets, Rough Skies, and Sunday Sidelines. Larry Wansley, thank you for giving me some of your time.
Thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed the visit and especially a lot of the things that we've talked about. You've been there.
Yeah.
They resonate with you and everything else. So thank you very much. It's been a very, very enjoyable time.